Deal 3, April. So we got January, March, and April. So we've accelerated our transactional frequency, let's just say. Now, I put in there the words A, B, and P. From a real estate investing standpoint, from an IRA investing standpoint, just generally speaking across the board, everybody wants to know, how do I find a deal? Where do I go look? You've got, currently you have the people that are saying, well, you can do it all electronically. You can. You can go on online and see all these properties, make offers, and that does in fact work. But there's nothing that works like the good old-fashioned method, which is signs. You've got car signs, direct mail, you've got the internet presence, you've got flyers, you've got driving the neighborhoods. Now, if you, in the old timers, we call that farming. Okay, today it's called guerrilla marketing. And according to Wikipedia, the term guerrilla marketing is easily traced to guerrilla warfare, which utilizes atypical tactics to achieve a goal in a competitive, unforgiving environment. I think the real estate business is a competitive and it's an unforgiving environment. To some extent, the nice thing about real estate is if you hold it long enough, it becomes pretty forgiving. But if you're expecting to turn something over on a short-term basis to make a profit, and you don't do your due diligence like we talked about earlier, it can be a very unforgiving environment. Now, I'm not saying that this is the end-all to be-all for transactions. I'm not saying anything that to deter anybody from doing any type of prospecting. All prospecting needs to be done, but it does need to be done. And the more you go to the root of prospecting, which is what we're going to cover in here, the better your transactions are going to be. And the less competition, I might add. Always be prospecting continued. David knows that there is no magic pool. You can't visit to dip out great deals. There's no magic pool. There are techniques, but there's no magic pool. David also knows that all great investors, and this second paragraph is absolutely key to some of these transactions that you're going to see in these next two coming up. Great deals are not found, they are created. I actually did a presentation a few years ago about a real estate group that for this heading. It's about an hour-long presentation, and it really boils down to that word: the greater, the better, the better the deal, the more you have worked hard at putting it together. And David knows that to keep the pool filled, you must always be prospecting. ABP. And through these prospecting efforts, he has a pool built that's wide, deep, and continuing these activities will ensure that they will never run dry. Sounds silly, but you're going to see why this is all important coming up. Deal 3. David found this property driving through a neighborhood close to downtown Asheville with older homes in an area that has been yuppieized over the last 10 years. And I do want to reemphasize again, everything I'm telling you is absolutely accurate as to my interview with David G., the records that are indicated in our company, and it's so simple that you're going to think it can't be. Well, you're going to have to accept the fact that it is, but it is this simple. David tracked the property for several years. He built rapport with the seller, the old-fashioned way. You meet the seller. You may not always be able to meet the seller, but if you work in your neighborhood, you meet the seller, rapport with the owner and the seller. And patience is a virtue in all forms of investing. The other thing that, if anybody gets offended out there, I apologize, but follow-up is a lost art, and lack of follow-up will cost you deals. That's the bottom line. I didn't run the sales statistics, but I will tell you that many surveys and studies that have been done is many people don't even buy until they been asked, in excess of 7 times, and most people give up after the first time. Oh, that doesn't work. They didn't do it. No money down financing, it does not work. Interest-free financing, it does not work. How many times did you test that? 1 time. Of course it's not going to work. Everything works. It doesn't work on every deal. Remember, this is a simple business. Educate yourself, prospect, follow up, close transactions, and then you cash checks. That's the business. If you're keeping track of the money available in David's accounts, you will know his balance is low. He has very little money left because he's bought the land, made the loan, and so what does he do for an investment? Now, this technique you're familiar with. You've heard all kinds of different accounts of what this is called. It's called flipping contracts. It's called assignment of contracts. It's called straight options. It's called wholesaling, and any other name that means getting involved with something quickly and getting out of it. So David decided to use the wholesaling technique. The interesting thing about these transactions is this. David was doing wholesaling previously to getting involved with the IRA, using many of these same techniques. However, as many people who have IRAs think, and that's why this presentation is designed around a real person, is David, with 2 degrees, highly intelligent, very successful outside of the IRA, had to question, because of the misconceptions of the self-directed IRA as it relates to investing in real estate is so different than what you would do in your own world. So David says one day, he says, well, can I do this? And we said, of course. It's like any other transaction. So David decided to go back to using some wholesaling techniques that he obviously uses on an ongoing basis. The contract purchase price for this particular property was $157,500. The depositor binder, depending what you guys call it, was $500. David G. entered into a partnership with a new partner for a 50% interest. The partner this time was a solo 401k, also one of our clients, but nevertheless, it was a solo 401k. So now we're partnering a Roth IRA with an entirely different type of retirement account. Each account put up $250 to cover the requested $500 deposit. David G. and his partner submitted all the required documents to American IRA, closed on the property using short-term seller financing. American IRA executed all documents on behalf of the retirement account and issued the checks to the closing attorney for the deposit. Now, how did he close? Well, short-term seller financing. So it's another technique that was brought into this, learned about seller financing. Well, why was the seller willing to close with such a nominal down payment? That's the question that is probably going to crop up in your mind. But of course, the other thing that's going to crop up in your mind is say, people don't do that, sellers don't do that, and understand that sellers do all kinds of things, and buyers do all kinds of things, and we as human beings do all kinds of things that we never would have imagined. David G. aggressively marketed the property to retail and wholesale buyers, and David G., because he did do his homework, he did get a good deal. He and another wholesaler agreed on a price of $176.5 and paid in cash to facilitate the double closing. So the transaction, even though on the surface looks like, well, it's just, it's a simple owner financing. Well, it wasn't as simple as it first appeared. What really took place was the cash came into the transaction. The wholesaler immediately sold the property to a builder. So the reality is the builder brought the cash in. Then it was utilized to pay off the original seller of the property that closed using very, very short term, meaning 5-minute seller financing. The cash came in from the new transaction as the down payment, paid off the seller's note, and they recorded all the deeds at the same time. Now, did David G. figure all this out himself? David G., as you will see, has a team of people and a working knowledge. So what you need to focus on is your working knowledge, and then you put together the team that covers these transactions to make sure they come out correctly and legally. David G. and his partners submitted all required documents to American IRA. American IRA signed the documents on behalf of the retirement account. I know I keep repeating myself on this, but I'm just trying to emphasize to you that the process is the same every time. Within less than 30 days, the builder closed for cash, which allowed David G.'s Roth to cash out for $95. Now, you may think I conflicted with that less than 30 days. I put that in there because I didn't want to go through the depth of how this actually took place. It actually closed the same day. A $9,500 profit from a $250 investment. And some knowledge of how to structure a transaction and some just good, hard, basic real estate work by driving the neighborhood, identifying a property, contacting the seller. And how many people were bidding on this property, you ask? Nobody. David G. had the only negotiating going on with the seller because he found the property, he built rapport, and when the seller was ready to go, he was the person who got the opportunity. And he decided to do it inside of his Roth IRA. The entire transaction was completed via letter of direction, with the American IRA signing on behalf of the Roth and the 401k. And as I mentioned before, the title is called American IRA LLC for the benefit of David's Roth, undivided 50%. And now with American IRA LLC for benefit of partners named solo 401k, undivided 50% interest. And this is, I mentioned earlier, this is a great example of parting with two different types of retirement accounts. That 401k could have been a SEP, a simple, it could have been a Coverdell, it could have been an HSA, it could have been a simple plan. And any one of those you could have plugged into that particular scenario, but this is the exact transaction. When partnering, the IRS requires that all profits are split according to actual investment. Income shifting is not allowed. I mentioned that earlier, and I repeat again, because in many circumstances, if you're investing in something under non-IRA circumstances, you do have the ability, if you have a partnership or an LLC, to actually allocate the funds, the profits, and the tax deductions differently than the actual percentages. So, but with the transaction being involved with an IRA, it must be split according to the actual ownership. Key points from the sale of the wholesaler. The Roth, and this is the part about diligence that I want to make sure that we're clear on, is the Roth IRA obtained title insurance, fire insurance, surveyed the property, and all the costs were paid for by the Roth IRA according to the percentage owned, in this case 50%. All agreements were in writing, including between the two retirement plans. Professionals were used to prepare all documents, appropriate insurance, surveys, and sales contracts. This step is not required. We, of course, will ask you to sign a waiver because you're not using a professional, but we're not going to, and when it's all said and done, it's ultimately up to you. This step is not required. It is still good business practice to ensure you protect your interest in the investment. And when we get into the advanced area of this, this is going to jump out off the screen like you will not believe when we get into the advanced section of this, because there is a transaction that is the perfect case study of why you do your due diligence to get yourself out of something whole and with a profit. David G. and his partner also did their due diligence prior to entering into the purchase contract with the seller. And we've talked about due diligence and given you a basic guideline. No investment is fail-proof. I'm going to repeat that. No investment is fail-proof. However, due diligence can stack the odds very heavily in the investor's favor. Always say to yourself, how do I get out if all goes wrong? Warren Buffett's famous quote is, rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, see rule number 1. I think it's well said.